afternoon, my conscious co-creators. Welcome to another edition of the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I am very, very pleased that you are all here with me today. We've got another wonderful show in store for you. I hope you've been catching the last couple of episodes. We've had some really great guests on, energy healers and spiritual teachers, and those episodes, I think, were actually pretty good. So I would love to hear your comments back. I would love to know, what you've been thinking of the show lately. Am I bringing on the kind of guests you're interested in? Is there something different you might like to see? Please, share your feedback and let me know. It would be wonderful because I want to make sure that the show is one that really serves you and really helps you to feel like I'm doing something that supports you in your journey. So let's start off as we have been doing with a blog post from a couple of years ago. And again, I'm just taking these in order, not cherry picking, not saying, oh, this is a good one, let's do this one today. Nope, I'm just going in order. These are about 2 years old. And so this one is entitled, When We Share Our Stories, We Light Up the World with Meaning. We all have stories in our life, stories that hold meaning. The meaning we have made from them is often quite personal. Yet there can be a message in there for other people. It can be hard for us to see the value of sharing the story. We may feel embarrassed or ashamed of the story. It might feel like a long-held secret that we are afraid to bring out into the light. For it could be a story of our abuse, neglect, or trauma. So it can be hard to make a meaning from those experiences that is actually uplifting for others. Yet we survived those events in our lives, and we are still here. That alone can be uplifting. And we may even find that we have built a bridge from our past to our future that can inspire others. That is where our message can be found, not in the trials and tribulations we have experienced, but in the way we persevered throughout it all. For we all can find a message in our stories that inspires other people from what we have experienced. We just have to be brave enough and bold enough to share them. And that is not easy, for it means being truly vulnerable with others, to bear not only our soul, but our hopes, fears, dreams, and regrets, all at the same time. And to do that is real courage. Finding that courage not only helps us, but it also helps all who will hear our stories. So it might be selfless or selfish to do so. Does not matter. What matters is that the stories are told and our meanings are given light. For those with ears to hear will do so. And if we touch even one heart with our words, it will all be worth it. So is there a story that is asking to be told from your life? Can you be brave enough to share it with the world? So this blog post I wrote a couple of years ago, I believe I wrote after a training and a ceremony uh, with a bunch of facilitators, and I remember our teacher Armand was talking about not just meaning making. He always talks about meaning making, but he was talking about the importance of sharing our stories with other people, and how when we share our stories, that inspires others and helps others to heal. Like it's not just for our own healing. And and that night, I remember different people sharing stories with different people, and you could see, and I've seen this not just that night, but many times, how when people get to hear each other's stories and they hear the similarity and commonality between them, that suddenly they don't feel so alone. And that connection, that deep connection, really helps them to open up and helps them to carry their story without such a heaviness to it. And it's so interesting because it's easy to get caught up in thinking that, oh, I keep telling the same story over and over again. It's not doing any good. All I'm doing is making myself depressed. And we do ourselves a disservice because we don't know who's going to hear our story, who's going to relate to it, who that story is going to inspire for them to make a different meaning from their own story. And that's the thing. When we can find a different way to hold our story, we can actually not just uplift ourselves, but uplift others. And it was quite interesting because I had a real experience of this last weekend. My wife and I went to go see a performance. Somebody recommended this show called The Neverending Songs. And it was at the small theater in Lincoln Center. We were lucky to get tickets because it was the rest of the performances were sold out. And this couple and the couple of musicians, it was just a husband and wife. And I mean, I don't want to call it a concert. It was more like a performance, but the stories they told behind all the songs and everything was so touching because it was all about grief. They told the story how when they got asked to perform at Lincoln Center, they were performing in San Francisco at the time. And the same day they got the call to perform, the wife's brother died from cancer. And through the performances, she started talking about having lost her first child during pregnancy. And then the fear when she got pregnant a second time, the fear of something going wrong with that. And they were singing, and not just about that, they were singing about so many different things, but deep, what what could be traumatic subjects, challenging subjects, but they sang about it in such a way, it was like they were celebrating the grief. And they totally drew in the whole audience. And my wife and I, we talked about it afterwards, and it was such a different way of experiencing someone else's grief. And it was uplifting. And how often in this world do we feel uplifted from grief. So it was such a unique experience because it was the way they told their story. It was the meaning they made from their story. And there was meaning woven throughout the whole, I think it was an hour and a half performance, and it was just so touching and beautiful. And it was a real lesson for me that pain and suffering and grief and loss does not have to be, it does not have to drag us down. It doesn't have to beat us up and 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 just cause us pain. If we celebrate it, if we find a way of bringing light to it and awareness to it and inviting others into the story in a way that inspires and uplifts them, oh, then even grief and loss and trauma can be something beautiful. And so I really honor those musicians. And I don't have the playbill in front of me, so I don't remember their name. I know it begins with a B, but I'll look it up during the break and I'll let you know. But it's so funny because this blog post, when we share our stories, we light up the world with meaning. This show I just experienced last Saturday was like the ultimate example of this. And so the so I, this blog post is really a call to everyone that your stories of your pain and your suffering and your trauma, they don't have to be downers. They don't have to be so negative. They don't have to be something that really pulls you off center. They can be something that if we change the meaning around them, if we can find a way to open up and share it in a way with others that they can laugh and cry and sing all at the same time, it can be a beautiful, beautiful experience. So let's not hide our stories from the world. Let us find a way to light up the world with our pain. And I see wonderful, loyal listener, Sanaya, who I have so much appreciation for. On the live stream, she says the pain of grief can be an uplift in other ways. That play had a beautiful concept. Thank you, Sanaya. Yeah, and there were other things about the play I didn't even touch upon. There were some moments that were truly funny, some moments that were truly awe-inspiring. Um, but I just want to really call to anyone who's listening to this show, whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to the recording, and maybe you're listening to it 5 years from when I created the show. It doesn't matter. This idea, this concept is one that is timeless. And there's so much uncertainty in the world today. There's so much pain in the world today. There's so much polarization. If we can find a way to bring people together, if we can learn to just not be afraid to share our pain, but to use our pain as a vehicle for connecting with others, and to do it in a way that brings a greater meaning, we can truly change the world. So I hope something in this blog post touches you. Again, the title of this blog post is "When We Share Our Stories, We Light Up the World with Meaning." And you can find this one, as you can find all my blog posts, at the talkradio.nyc/blog. Of course, also on my personal website, theconsciousconsultant.com. And I would love to know what you feel about this blog post. I would love to hear your comments. So please feel free, whether you're listening live or even after the fact, post your comments. Let me hear about them. Let me know. I hope this touches you in some way. All right, we're going to go to break. And unfortunately, my guest has not shown up. So we're going to talk about something different. And I'll let you know what that is when we come back. So you're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this live every Thursday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on talkradio.nyc, and all over social media, everywhere from YouTube to Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn to Twitch. And we will be right back with the rest of our show in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. So I was supposed to have a rescheduled guest who got sick when he was originally supposed to come on, by the name of Lama Mike Crowley, who wrote the book Psychedelic Buddhism, which is all about how Buddhists can use psychedelics to enhance their spiritual experience. So since that was supposed to be my topic, and he obviously isn't here, um, uh, what I will talk about is something that I don't think I mentioned. I've probably mentioned on the show, but I haven't really talked about it. As I was at the Horizons conference a couple of weeks ago here in New York City, which is the longest running psychedelics research conference. I think this year was like the 16th year, that's been running every year. And it was really a wonderful experience. And I've been going to it now. I think I went the first time either in 2018. And during the pandemic, it skipped a year or two. So I've gone like four times, I think. And this one was a particularly interesting one for me, because there were some really good talks I was able to sit in on. And I'll just share a couple of the lessons that I learned from the Horizons conference. Of course, there's a lot going on in individual states around decriminalizing psychedelics. Obviously, Oregon and Colorado have already legalized psilocybin for medical use. And there were people from those states talking about what's going on, some of the changes, some of the initial feedback. But then there were many other states that are introducing state bills in their legislatures to do the same. And I believe there's something like 15, at least 15 states that bills have been introduced this year. Now, whether they get passed, some are just for research committees and other stuff. But there's so much happening in this industry, and there's so much movement towards bringing these substances to the general public that it's very, very exciting. And what really, I guess, gets me so hopeful is that even in these conferences, there's still Indigenous representation. Perhaps not as much as some people would like, but there were people from tribes there. There were people talking about honoring where these traditions originally came from. And so for me, it was a really nice meeting of sort of the past with the future. That there was this sort of recognition that these substances come from traditions that are thousands of years old, and that many of these wisdom keepers have brought it forward that it might have otherwise been lost. Now, of course, the West does have a habit of appropriating things and taking things and using it for our own purposes. But in my experience, these compounds, these substances, these plants, whatever you want to call them, help us to not just heal from trauma, emotional distress, grief, loss, but they reconnect us with our heart, with our soul, with our spirit. And that when that truly happens, I've seen it happen many, many times, people become more connected to nature, more aware of our impact on the environment, honoring these ancient traditions much more so, and just overall being better human beings. Which, let's face it, like that's what we need now more than anything else, is just something to help people be better human beings. And so at the conference, seeing like what's going on in some individual state levels. And there was one gentleman in particular, and forgive me, I don't remember his name, who was from Kentucky, who had been the chairman of this project to look at iboga, which is an African psychedelic medicine. That's a very, very powerful medicine for treating opioid addiction. And he was like an evangelical, but he was great. He really got the whole audience up on their feet applauding, but talking about the impact of the opioid addiction, the impact of alcoholism and all this stuff, and how many people we lose every single day to opioid addiction. And iboga has been proven to be one of the most, if not the most effective way to treat addiction. I remember hearing about it years ago, that in Europe they did studies with it, and they found that for treating heroin addiction, I'm not an addiction specialist, okay? I don't know that much about addiction. I don't have any personal experience with addiction. I know some people who have, but I'm not very well educated about it. But what I remember hearing, that heroin is like the hardest addiction to break. That even in the best treatments for heroin addiction, the recidivism rate, the people who like actually able to truly kick the habit and move forward is such a small percentage, like I don't know, less than 20%. But in this study I remember hearing about, and I don't have the citation, I apologize, they found that there was like a 60 to 70% cure rate working with iboga and working with an integration coach afterwards. And that they were looking to actually use iboga in Kentucky for treating opioid addiction. And unfortunately, that project got canceled because election, politics, a different person comes in as the state attorney general and didn't like the idea of using substances and just squashed it and got rid of the whole thing, which is heartbreaking. Though he did talk about how many other states have been looking at the work that he did before it got shut down, were very impressed with it, and are looking to potentially create their own addiction treatments using iboga. And so these ancient traditions, these ancient substances, there is so much there for us to learn from. There is so much there to help us with modern day issues that I am so grateful to all the wisdom keepers who kept this knowledge alive over the centuries, even through persecution, whether it was in Africa or South America or Central America. I mean, the conquistadors and the Catholic Church literally pursued and killed any medicine man that they found that were using these substances. And even in the North America, the native traditions, the same thing. And there was tremendous genocide, there was tremendous horror being done all over the Americas and all over the world. And now we're finding that the very things we were persecuting before are the things we need to survive, have better health, to move forward. So I'm ever so grateful. And so you'll hear me talk about indigenous wisdom, indigenous technology, as I do so with extreme honoring and extreme gratitude. All right. So when we come back, I have another example of a presentation from Horizons that was so powerful that I really want to share, that shows how these substances have application to help with the problems of the world today. So please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we will be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back. So I'm talking about my experiences at the Horizons conference that just happened earlier this month in New York City. Usually it happens in the fall, but this past fall they moved it to the springtime because I think it was too close to the Psychedelic Sciences conference in Denver, which was huge, massive, 12,000 people conference, and so it was a little too close together, so they pushed it, and it happened this springtime. So we'll see next year when it's going to be. But so I've been talking about sort of what I'd learned and some of the sessions I sat in on, and the one that for me was particularly beautiful and heartwarming and really shows the necessity of using these indigenous wisdom and these traditions of psychoactive plants, ethnogenics, entactogens, all of this whole family of psychedelics. Was there was this presentation by these three gentlemen, one Israeli, two Arabic, one was Palestinian. I think the other gentleman, was he Arab, Israeli Arab or Palestinian Arab? I don't know. But they spoke about a study they had done where they brought a group of people from Israel and from Palestine. This is before the pandemic, so it's about 6 years ago. They brought them up to Spain, and they had them do 3 nights of ayahuasca together. And they spoke in particular about the first night and about, the transformation that happened of the relationship between the people from Israel and Palestine. and what unfolded during those 3 nights, and how by the end of their intense experience with grandmother, that these people came together and realized how much they had in common with their pain and their grief and their trauma and their fear, and how it created such a strong bond between them, and created a sense of trust between them. And to me, it's like this is exactly what we need in the conflict areas around the world. I mean, not just in Israel and Palestine, but in every region. That if we want to find a way to peace, that this is a very powerful way to get there. And what I found so interesting about it was what they said was the most difficult part was when they came home and they went back to their respective towns and villages and cities, and how they had a hard time integrating back into normal society because their friends, their relatives, their neighbors, nobody could relate to what they were saying. And everybody thought each others were crazy. What do you mean? You can't trust these people. What are you talking about? Oh, they're brainwashing you. And it just highlighted for me of how insidious this division between people around the world is, and how much this polarization, this us versus them, is so ingrained in our society that even when a group of people come together and are vulnerable with each other and share their pain and grief with each other, and they learn how similar they are to each other, and can actually open up and learn to trust each other, how when they go back to their normal environment, it's like everything's trying to pull them apart and trying to tell them they're wrong. And then with the war that's happening in Gaza, and it was interesting that the one gentleman who was Palestinian, and he was on video, and he said that of and he was an extreme peace advocate, and he's been, peace advocate for 20-30 years. Like, this is nothing new for him. It's just using something new, and how challenging it is to be a peace advocate in this time. But he said, like, he knew that people engaged in this work, that there's a certain level of trust that he has that he doesn't have with people who don't engage in this work. And I've asked other people about this, and they absolutely agree. And the one, I guess, hopeful thing he said in the midst of all this tragedy that's unfolding in the Middle East, and I know at least this is true on the Israeli side, but he said that there's a real feeling among the people that the leadership has truly let them down. That on both sides, that there's extreme mistrust to the leadership. There's extreme skepticism, and And really, people are just fed up with the leadership as it is. And so that means there's an opportunity for change. And I know from my sister who lives in Israel, and I talk to her and I hear from her how, the regular Israelis are completely fed up with the Israeli government. They come very upset about the whole handling of the situation and the lack of concern with the hostages. And then on the other side of the fence, I think that there's also a lot of anger towards the leadership of how they could let this happen. How could they let it come to this? And so when they said that, when he said that, there's a possibility that maybe we get a change in leadership and we can really change things. And I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if that's realistic. And I don't know, but I'm really, really hoping that people rise up, that people stop being so timid and just going along with whatever those in leadership positions are saying and doing, and say, no, this is not right. This is not what we believe in. This is not what we want. And so while what's going on today is a tragedy, and there's just no way you can say it's not a tragedy. It's a tragedy in so many different ways. Because violence only begets more violence. But I hope that the people of the world are waking up and getting sick of all this violence. And that for me, this is really the true gift of psychedelics, is when we can bring it to those who are the most traumatized, who are in the most pain, who have suffered the most. And if it can bring them to a place of peace, that maybe, just maybe, we can break the cycle of violence that we seem so stuck in. And so this one session, it really touched me, as you can tell, quite a bit. I mean, I have a personal connection to what's going on there. But I hope and I pray that all that's being done is not in vain. And so this was one of the really important things to get out there. And that, while there are ups and downs in the psychedelic industry, and there's still challenges, and there's still things happening, and there are things that look like we're moving in a positive direction for people involved in the industry. It's still difficult, and it's still uncertain. I mean, as of today, the only federally legalized psychedelic is ketamine. My wife is a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist. She works with her clients with ketamine. But so far, that's the only one. But actually, there are some updates. And although the state has, 2 states have legalized psilocybin, more are probably going to do it. But, there's still a little bit of battle. There's still a little bit of a uphill climb. But I do have some other information. I do have some other perspectives about what's going on in the psychedelics industry that I learned from the conference and outside of the conference. And so when we come back for the last segment, I'll talk about, some of the last things that I've heard of, and some of the last things that seem to be happening that make me hopeful, and then some things that also make me concerned. So please let me know your questions, your experiences. If there's anything you would like to share or would like me to answer, please post it on one of the live streams while we're still live, and I'll make sure to get to it. So you are listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we will be right back to wrap it all up in just a moment.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back. All right. So for those of you who may have joined a little bit late, our scheduled guest today unfortunately did not make it to the show. So I've been speaking about my experiences at the Horizons conference on psychedelics that just happened here in New York earlier this month here in New York City. And I've just been talking about a couple of different sessions, a couple of different things that particularly touched me. And so here's some of the things why I'm hopeful about the future of psychedelics and what's happening in the industry and in the United States anyway. So the first thing is that the MDMA, which is I guess technically an entactogen, not a psychedelic, is being reviewed by the FDA right now. It's in the phase 3 clinical trials have been completed, and we should actually hear from them whether it's approved for medical use or not, probably sometime but before the end of this year, in the fall maybe. And from what I hear in the industry, that not too far behind that is the clinical trials on psilocybin for treating depression, and that we will probably hear a determination about psilocybin next year. So that then, besides ketamine, we will also have, hopefully, MDMA and psilocybin legalized within the next couple of years, at least for medical use, right? That's where everything starts. And there are many churches trying to get exemptions, and there are many other things happening that can bring other stuff to the forefront. And yes, there are also many municipalities, even though there are only 2 states have legalized psilocybin, but there are many municipalities across the country that have decriminalized psychedelic substances. And you may say, well, what's the big deal with that? It's still not legalizing something. And I'm like, yes, it's not legalizing something, but it puts it down, decriminalization puts it down on the bottom of the list. Law enforcement isn't going after it anymore, except in certain circumstances. But it's an indication. It's an indication of the movement to where we're going. And it doesn't mean that that might not get reversed, doesn't mean that that might not change, but it's just kind of, to me, showing me where the energy around this stuff is headed. And I also heard a rumor from somebody I know who told me that the DEA has even been speaking to indigenous elders and some longtime well-known underground psychedelic guides about when things get legalized, when things change, how to manage it, how to hold it, what to do. That the DEA actually reached out to these individuals, not to persecute them, but to get advice from them. And that is something I thought I would never see in my lifetime. And so all of this together, to me, indicates that we're moving in a direction where, at least in certain situations, under certain conditions, there is a recognition of the power of these substances to help people, to heal people, to move us forward. And that also a recognition like, hey, this may not just be for healing, but this could also be as a spiritual practice and for a use of as a sacred sacrament. So all that has me relatively optimistic to what's going on in the industry. However, there are some things to be concerned about. So, for instance, the week after the conference, Business Insider came out with an article about bias in the studies and how Rick Doblin, the founder of MAPS, did some gray area, potential sketchy stuff around getting donors and things like that. And personally, I think doing a great disservice. But there are still forces out there that probably would like this stuff not to be legalized, would like to not to see things move forward. And so none of this is certain by any stretch of the imagination. And that it's still all very tentative. And hey, let's face it, we've got an election coming up in November, and depending on who gets elected, and I think in the past I've made my views pretty apparent in terms of who I would like to see get elected. But that can still sway things and change things. And that, one of the really big challenges around this is it needs to be something bipartisan. It needs to be something that goes beyond politics. And in many ways, there has been a lot of bipartisan support for the legalization of psychedelics, in particular for helping the military, for helping first responders, for helping, those people on the front lines with PTSD. These substances have been proven so effective to help them. And I think that's something everyone can agree on. And I think that's where we need to focus, on where we can get people to agree on this, so that regardless of the administration, things can still move forward. But the world is very unstable right now, even here in the US. And, it saddens me to think that things are still kind of a toss-up in November. But things can really go either way. And things can go backwards. So I think it's important for all of us, for anyone hearing this show who believes and who at least know someone, even if you don't have your own experience with psychedelics, at least know someone who's found healing, who's found help through the use of psychedelics. Now, yes, absolutely, there are people out there doing stupid things with psychedelics, and there are people getting hurt, partially because there are a lot of people out there who think, oh, I took magic mushrooms, I can facilitate this, I know what I'm doing, and they absolutely don't know what they're doing. So that's why it's so important to be careful who you select as a guide to work with, whether above ground or underground. And in some ways, the underground guides have a lot more experience than the above ground guides. But asking the right questions, keeping your own agency around things, the importance of all of that. And if anybody would like to hear my advice or like to contact me about, hey, how do I research someone? How do I find out? What questions do I ask? I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone about that. You can always reach out to me at sam@theconsciousconsultant.com, and I'd be more than happy to give you advice and let you know that if you're designed to research this for yourself, what to look for and what kinds of questions to ask and what to listen for in terms of the responses to know, like, oh, this is someone good to work with, or that sounds like a red flag. So that's our show for the day. And so that's our conversation around my perspective on the Horizons Conference. So sort of an extemporaneous show because my guest who was supposed to come didn't make it. So I hope it was something that inspired you, interested you, got you a little curious. Maybe you'll do a little bit of your own research and see if perhaps these very powerful substances might be able to help you in some way. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for being with me through this show. Again, if you missed any part of today's show, you can always catch the replay on talkradio.nyc and on all the different podcasting platforms, including Apple, YouTube, Pandora, iHeartRadio, all the major podcasting platforms, which they're starting to shrink. They're consolidating a bit. And of course, on all of our social media channels, just look for Talk Radio NYC, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, we're everywhere. And don't forget, coming up later today at 5 p.m., it's Frank Harrison and his show, Frank About Health. And of course, on Friday, we have Philanthropy in Focus at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by Always Friday, your show about small business. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care. We will talk to you all next week.